morning, Tom.
Good morning.
Thank you for dropping by today and to do the interview with us.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. To begin with, we just start with how do you start photography?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I was a kid, when I was a real kid, small kid, I found a small darkroom kit that my father had had. It was just a few trays and a few mixer beakers and a safe light, like ruby light they called in those days. So I began by making some contact prints in the bathroom of old family negatives. And I thought it was really interesting and really magical, and watching the image come up in the developer. But I only did that fooled around for a year or so, and then I didn't touch it again. When I finished high school, I studied painting for 2 years, and then my education got interrupted by something. And during that time of interruption, I bought a camera, a 35 millimeter camera, a Petri camera, I think it was called, and started fooling around with that and found that I actually enjoyed the spontaneousness of photography more than the sort of more deliberate act of painting. And so then I decided to go to photography school. And that was that. No looking back since then. I think I started photography school in maybe 1972. And then I started working as a teaching assistant in that same school that I graduated from. And then gradually I got a job teaching in one university and then another university and then high school for the arts. So I basically supported my photography habit through teaching all the way up until I came to Vietnam in 1994. So really I've been working continuously from like the mid-70s up until now, always in photography.
As you've been teaching for such an extensive period, you must have seen a lot of different bodies of works and different kinds of images, right?
That was one of the most interesting things about teaching, is that you see your students work, and you have hundreds of students and they're all different. They all have different movies going on inside their head, and they're all producing different kinds of images, you know. And I taught not only in university, but one interesting place I taught was a community arts center, where anybody who had an interest in anything could pay the money and take a class, you know. So like they had painting and drawing and pottery, ceramics and photography. And I designed the photography darkroom studio and program for that school. And that was in some ways more interesting or as interesting as university, because these were people often with no academic background at all, just liked photography, and they were not, they didn't have the burden of history or academics, and they just did what they wanted to do. And some of that work was extraordinary, really. I can still remember the work of some students who they had no idea what they were doing. They were just pointing the camera at things that interested them, you know, and it was just so free and full of life and amazing.
After teaching so many classes, so many generations of students, and do you notice that now there are endless images being produced every day, being made and I would describe it like we live in a world saturated with images.
Yeah, I mean, that's for sure.
How do you personally navigate this world?
Well, a lot of my navigation has to do with ignoring the masses of images, you know. I mean, Vietnam is especially interesting for that, because it's like the selfie was invented for Vietnam. I mean, I live down in the center of Saigon off of Nguyen Huê Street, you know. And I mean, on weekends and at night, it's just like, it's a selfie factory. It's just, and what happens to all these images? They get posted on social media, and Facebook and Instagram, and videos on TikTok and all that. And personally, I find it a very interesting phenomena, but I don't see it as, what do I want to say, as sort of interfering with like the kind of work that I do. Right? I mean, my work, I think the work of any serious photographer these days is work that the creator of the image wants people to go into, right? Whereas a lot of this new generation is this massive influx of digital imagery is more about looking at some kind of image, you know, and the personalities harboring, living inside those images. So, yeah, I mean, for the most part, I navigate by ignoring, even though you can't escape them. And it's interesting, but I don't know. To my mind, there's a lot of this. There's a lack of depth. But who knows? Maybe maybe it's the death of depth. Maybe it's the birth of the shallow image and the shallow personality and the complete dedication to appearance. And who knows? I don't know. I mean, it's like, it's amazing and interesting and sometimes annoying.
Having lived in Vietnam for more than 25 years.
More than 20 years, I guess.
More than 20 years.
Yeah.
How do you get your inspiration? How do you get inspired? Where do you find inspiration?
Yeah, that's another one of those questions that one really needs to ponder. But for me, I mean, inspiration has been maybe like one half based on observation and the other just purely mysterious arrival from I don't know what. Recently I saw an image that, I saw an interview with Bob Dylan, the singer and poet, done by the journalist Ben Bradley, and it must have been done back in maybe the mid-90s or something. So the journalist asked Bob Dylan, he says, well, you know, you had the songs in the 70s and the 80s that had all of this imagery, and how do you do that? You know? And Dylan looks at him and he starts reciting, you know, darkness at the break of noon, shadows even the silver spoon, the handmade blade, the child's balloon, eclipses both the sun and moon. And he stops and he says, where does that come from? He said, I don't know. You know. And Bradley says, can you still do it? He said, no. You know, I do something else, but I can't do that anymore. And I feel a lot that way, that a lot of the images that have come to me have just arrived somehow from somewhere, and I don't know where, and I don't know how. They just do. And I follow them. Often when I can't sleep, you know, or like when I'm waiting to get up and I want to go back to sleep, but it's too late and I know I have to get up and my mind's going around, and a lot of stuff occurs to me during that kind of a semi-dream state. So that's the part of the process that for me just kind of arrives from I don't know where. The other part is really based on, and these two parts merge, of course, but the other part is based on like observation. I'll see something, and I'll just say, wow, man, how can I transform it? That can be transformed somehow with the photographic process, because I'm interested in what has always interested me about photography is what the process can see that we as normal average human beings cannot see, right? And that was, I think, the initial and lasting magic of photography for me, is that it opens a different existence, it opens different worlds. And so having worked with the process for so long, I have a number of ways that, you know, I know that images can be transformed through my particular knowledge of the process, right? And so sometimes I'll see something and, you know, what can I do with that? And I think something can be done with that. That will move it from the mundane thing that it exists for everybody else into something different and maybe charged with a different reality or a different existence. And then I'll push that button and in these days make a file, right? And then put that file into the various programs that I use, because I haven't done analog in a long time, and then see what happens. And sometimes something really magical happens, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes, for me, usually it happens in spurts. And then some kind of series comes out of that, and then that's that, right? And then I'm tired of that, right? And then I wait. I do a lot of waiting. Wait for something to happen, and So it's this balance of like mysterious inspiration from the sky, basically, right, and observation that suggests opportunities to penetrate into the realm of special vision that the camera has, especially time too. I mean, for me, photography is about light, of course, and time that we can't see, especially long time, or moments of time piled up upon itself, or a series of the same thing stretched out in time. So these are the main areas that I work in, I think.
Could you describe your thought process or your behind the making of Cloud and Cloud Dragon, both of which images are being exhibited in the coming show?
Right.
Hoa Ta?
There wasn't much of a thought process behind those. At that time, when I made those pictures, I was living in Vũng Tàu, and I had an apartment very close to the water, on the water basically, almost. And my balcony just faced the sea with some hills over to the right. And it was like an endless movie of changing atmosphere, changing worlds, really. From morning until night, even through the night, especially when there was a moon. And it was like endlessly fascinating just to watch. I didn't really feel the need to photograph at all. It was just enough to watch it. I'd sit out there with my feet up on the balcony, glass of wine, watching the worlds change, because the weather changed so quickly down there. From bright and sunny to like cloud dragons, and the clouds especially. So I just got interested in what these clouds were doing, because they really became alive for me. It seemed like they almost had their own kind of consciousness. And sometimes they were like in the Cloud Dragon, following the ship and breathing down some kind of mist over the ship. And what was happening to the people when they were in there? Did they even know the dragon was up there breathing some kind of mysterious life into them, or what? Or taking it out? Who knows? But so, if there was any idea or thought process, that was it. It was just engaging with the changing world, and knowing also the photographic process always figures into my work, right? And knowing how I could exaggerate and alter and take something and make it even more mysterious if I could, right? With the process. And changing colors or altering, whatever, right? Because if you were to stand there or sit there looking at that Cloud Dragon moment, it didn't look anything like that. It looked like that in my head, because I knew this guy, I could bring him out, and down there I could bring that, and I could build a relationship of light between those elements. So again, this is a case of the initial attraction of the event, we'll call it an event, as modified by the process and my blending of the two to make those two images, especially the cloud dragon. The other image of just the clouds, that was just one of those things like, my God, look at that, click, right? That was basically that, right? The cloud dragon had a little more process behind it. The other one was in Vung Tau also, but a different apartment where I couldn't see the sea. But that apartment by the sea was just an endless stream of worlds passing by, and sometimes portals also. There's another one in that in the same series with the cloud dragon where there's a hole, an actual hole in the sky, where everything in that hole is totally different than everything around it, right? And it is a real portal. I mean, if you went in there, you're not coming back, right? You're going to be in a completely different universe, time zone or whatever, right? Past, future, who knows, right? But so there was a lot of that attraction about the skies of Vung Tau for me. I mean, that was just an amazing thing. So yeah, that's just a case of attraction and some manipulation, and in the end going, wow, look at that. That's not bad.
And I want to ask more about your experience with the photography process as you transition from analog to digital.
It was a kind of natural, it was a decision that I didn't make. It was a decision that was forced on me, right? When I came here in 1994, I had been doing only analog work. I'd been making giant murals by hand. And I made a kind of gadget I bought from plumbing stores and to roll pictures back and forth and I made these trays. And I was making giant photo murals. I did some of that commercially for a while as well. And I had been doing that for years, and that's all I ever did. And then I came here, and I didn't have a darkroom. I didn't have access to a darkroom. At that time, there were a few photographers around Saigon that could process black and white film, and it always came out bulletproof. I mean, it was just you couldn't print them, and I had no way to print them anyway, right? So I stopped photographing. I was photographing in my head. I was making mental photographs, but I wasn't doing anything with a camera. And at that time, digital camera, if it was good, it was hugely expensive. And if it wasn't hugely expensive, it wasn't good. So in the mid to late 90s, I got a little Canon 4.5 megapixel pocket camera, and which had absolutely amazing quality, by the way. And so it was so small that I could stick it in my pocket. I've been working with 4x5 cameras, right? I worked with the Rolleiflex on travel photographs. When I traveled, my architectural work, a lot of it was done with 2.25 with the Rolleiflex. But 35 millimeter I hadn't done in a long time. And this little thing could fit right in your pocket, like a phone, right? It was before the phone cameras, So I started fooling around with that, and I was quite amazed with the fact that you could produce a reasonable image like that without a darkroom, without any chemicals, and take it somewhere and get it printed. I thought that was pretty interesting. So then I got a better one. I got maybe 6 megapixels or something like that. Another Canon, and that was a totally surprisingly excellent camera. I wish I kept it actually, for the size. And so that led me to think that there was maybe life after analog for me, because it really wasn't practical for me to put a darkroom together. And there wasn't any place around like Noir Photo or somewhere where you could go and rent a darkroom time. That didn't exist. So for me, it was either digital or nothing. So what do you do, right? I had all this stuff piling up in my head, and I had to get it out somewhere or my head would explode. So then I bought a Micro Four Thirds sensor size, Olympus, and then I got serious again. I think that was when I was living in Cambodia, and so that's when I started work. That would have been early 2000s, maybe, something like that. Maybe even up to the mid 2000s when I really was able to get serious about photography again. And so that's, but there was that gap there of at least 8 years or so where, you know, I never made anything that wound up on a wall. They existed on screens, but I get small prints made or something. But when I got to the Olympus, then I saw that, you know, prints like this were really possible. And you could get, I was making digital C prints first. And then, and then more and more, and then discovered Danny via labs, and so it was a transition that was forced on me. I didn't have any choice. It was either digital or nothing. So when you have a choice like that, what do you do? So yeah, that's how that transition happened. And it was good. I like digital work. I really like digital editing a lot. You know, I do with digital editing. I do what I used to do in the darkroom. That's all I do. You know, exposure, lighter, darker, contrast, more or less, burning certain areas darker, dodging certain areas lighter. Right? But I can do it with such precision digitally that I find it really fascinating and enjoyable and really fun. So yeah, I like that. Although I do have a urge now to shoot some film again. I want to make negatives again. I was looking at a lot of my old negatives when I was back in the States, and they're beautiful things. These negatives, 4x5 negatives, you know, they're just beautiful things. So so I may eventually go backwards, but I'll never give up digital because it's just, you know, one's not better than the other. It's just different medium, right? It's like watercolor and oil or acrylic or something. It's just a different medium. And but I've never taken to serious work with a phone yet. I haven't. There's something about that just, I don't know, doesn't feel right.
I just have one last question.
Okay.
For the people who are coming to this exhibition that Hoa Ta is organizing, do you have any words that you would like to share with the audience? Like,
slow down and don't look at the pictures, look into the pictures and see what they reveal to you. And you may be surprised. Thank you.